Hi, my name is Mosh Hamadani, and I'm super excited to be your instructor. In this 3-hour course, you're going to learn everything you need to get started with SQL or SQL. First, I'm going to give you a 3-minute introduction to SQL. Then we're going to install the necessary tools and write our first SQL query. This course is ideal for anyone who wants to learn SQL from scratch, but also anyone with some basic knowledge who wants to fill in the missing gaps. By the end of this course, you'll be able to retrieve, insert, update, and delete data in databases. We'll talk about tables, relationships, different types of joins, subqueries, regular expressions, and much, much more. These are the essential concepts that every software developer or data scientist must know. This SQL course is packed with tons of exercises that help you both learn and remember the SQL syntax. Also, there is a table of content below this video, so you can quickly jump to specific tutorials. Now let's jump in and get started. Let's start the course with a quick overview of databases, what they are, and how we use them. A database is a collection of data stored in a format that can easily be accessed. In order to manage our databases, we use a software application called Database Management System, or DBMS. We connect to a DBMS and give it instructions for querying or modifying data. The DBMS will execute our instructions and send results back. Now, we have several database management systems out there, and these are classified into two categories: relational and non-relational, also called NoSQL. In relational databases, we store data in tables that are linked to each other using relationships. That's why we call these databases relational databases. Each table stores data about a specific type of object, like customer, product, order, and so on. SQL or SQL is the language that we use to work with these relational database management systems. It looks like this. We use SQL to query or modify our data. In this course, you're going to learn everything about this powerful language. Now, there are many different relational database management systems out there. Some of the most popular ones are MySQL, SQL Server by Microsoft, and Oracle. But of course, there are plenty more. Each database management system has a different flavor of SQL, but all these implementations are very similar and are based on the standard SQL specification. So most of the SQL code that you will learn in this course will work with any database management system. In this course, we'll be using MySQL, which is the most popular open source database in the world. All right, now back to this diagram. What about non-relational databases? In non-relational databases, we don't have tables or relationships. These databases are very different from relational databases, but that's a topic for an entirely different course. What you need to know is that non-relational database management systems don't understand SQL. They have their own query language. So we use SQL to work with relational database management systems. Now, before we jump in and install MySQL, let me clarify something quickly. As you talk to different people, you will hear two different pronunciations of SQL: SQL or SQL. What is the correct way? Well, it depends on who you ask. And of course, everybody thinks their way of pronouncing this word is the right way. But here's a little history about this language. SQL was originally developed at IBM in the 70s, and back then it was initially called SQL, short for Structured English Query Language. But they changed the acronym to SQL because SQL was the trademark of an airplane company. So to this date, there's been an argument about what is the right way to pronounce this language. Generally speaking, people in non-English speaking countries call it SQL. I'm used to calling it SQL because it's shorter and sweeter than SQL. But if you prefer to call it SQL, that's totally fine with me. I'm not going to get mad at you. So that's the history behind this language. But what about MySQL as a software product? Developers of this product prefer to call it MySQL rather than MySQL, but they don't mind if we call it MySQL. In this course, I'll be teaching you SQL with MySQL. Hey guys, Mosh here. I just wanted to let you know that you really don't have to memorize anything in this course because I've created a complete cheat sheet with summary notes for you. You can find it below this video in the description box. So I have done my best to create the best possible, most comprehensive SQL course for you, and I would really appreciate it if you support my hard work by liking and sharing this video. Thank you so much. Now, let's continue. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to install MySQL on your computer. Now here I'm using a Mac, so first I will show you how to install MySQL on a Mac computer, and then I will show you how to install it on Windows. So if you're a Windows user, feel free to skip this tutorial. Now, open up your browser and head over to mysql.com. Then go to the downloads page and scroll down to the bottom. Here you should see MySQL Community Edition. This is absolutely free, and we're going to use that throughout this course. So let's go ahead with that. Now on this page, click on MySQL Community Server. And then on this page, you should see available releases for Mac OS. So in this list, download the first item, which is a DMG archive. All right. Now on the next page, click on No Thanks, just start my download. All right, as you can see, we are getting a DMG file, which is basically a setup wizard. All right, now the DMG is downloaded, so let's open it and then double click on this package. This will launch an installation wizard, which is pretty easy to use. So simply click on Continue and again and again. I agree with the license agreement and install MySQL. It's going to ask for your password. This is the password that you use to log into your computer. So let's put that here. All right. Now here we need to set a password for the root or the admin user. So click Next, and in this box, type a complex password. All right, now let's finish the installation. And enter your computer's password one more time. And we're done. That was super easy and sweet. All right, we installed MySQL Community Server. Now we need a graphical tool to connect to this server and manage our databases. So back to the downloads page. One more time, scroll to the bottom and go to MySQL Community Edition. And on this page, somewhere you should see MySQL Workbench. This is a graphical tool that we use to connect to our database server. So let's go ahead and download this as well. Now, once again on this page, we need to download a DMG archive. So download. And again, we have to say, no, we don't want to log in or sign up. So let's just go ahead and download the DMG. And then open it. All right, you're going to see something like this. So simply drag this MySQL Workbench and drop it onto the applications folder. So let's go ahead with that. Now this is going to copy this into the applications folder. Beautiful. So we're done with the installation. That was super easy. Now press Command and Space and search for MySQL Workbench. There you go. Let's open it. Now the first time we get this message, because this is an application that we have downloaded from the internet. So we need to tell Mac that we trust this. Let's go ahead with that. So this is MySQL Workbench. Now by default, you should see a connection here. If you don't see that, you need to create it. Let me show you how to do that. So for this demo, I'm going to right click this and delete this connection. All right. Now let's create a connection from scratch. So click on this plus icon. On this page, give this connection a name. Let's say local instance. Now the connection method that we're going to use is TCP/IP, which is set by default. The host name is 127.0.0.1, which is the address of the local machine. And the port is 3306. This is the default port for MySQL Server. That is the username of the admin. Now we need to enter the password. This is the password that we set during the installation. So click on Store in Keychain. And in this box, type the password for the MySQL Server. All right. And finally, let's test the connection. Okay, we successfully connected to MySQL Server on the local machine. Beautiful. Let's click OK. And here we have a connection on the homepage of MySQL Workbench. Every time we open MySQL Workbench, we use this connection to connect to our local server. All right, we're done with the installation of MySQL on a Mac. Next, I will talk about installing MySQL on a Windows computer. So feel free to skip that tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to install MySQL on Windows. So open up your browser and head over to mysql.com. Then go to the downloads page. Now here, scroll down to the bottom. We're going to use MySQL Community Edition, which is absolutely free. So let's go with this. Now select MySQL Community Server and then scroll down. So here you should see something like this, MySQL installer for Windows. This is the recommended method for installing MySQL on Windows. So click on this. All right, on the next page, scroll down and download the first installer here. On the next page, scroll down and click on no thanks, just start my download. Otherwise, you have to create an account and log in, which is unnecessary for following this course. So let's go with this and save this file to our computer and then run it. All right, we're going to use this setup wizard to install MySQL on our computer. This is very easy. All you have to do is to click next. But there are a couple of places where you need to enter a password. Let me show you. So on the first page, for the setup type, we're going to use the developer default setup. Go to the next page. Now here we're getting a little warning because this installation wizard wants to install the connector for Python 3.7. But I don't have Python on this machine, so that's why I'm getting this warning. Now on your machine, you might or you might not get this error. It doesn't really matter. Just click next and one more time. So here are the products that are going to get installed. The first one is MySQL Server. The second one is MySQL Workbench. This is the graphical tool that we use to connect to our database server and manage our databases. You're going to see that soon. So click on execute. Now this is going to take about 5 to 10 minutes. So I'm going to pause the recording. All right, all the products are installed. Beautiful. Let's go to the next page. And again, here on the group replication page, also click on next. On the next page, which is about networking, leave all the default settings. So let's go to the next page. Now we should set a password for the root or the admin user. So click on next. And in this box, type a password for the admin user. All right, and then let's go to the next page. Once again, leave all the default settings and click on next and execute one more time. All right, and now let's finish the installation. Once again, we have to click on next and then finish. And one more time, there's so many steps. Now here's the page where you need to enter the admin password. So the page is called Connect to Server. You can see the username is root, which represents the admin user. So in this box, enter the password that you set earlier, then click on check. Okay, connection was successful, beautiful. Let's go to the next page and click on execute and finally finish. There you go, we have one more step. Next. Now finally, after all these steps, the installation is complete. Now this is going to start MySQL Workbench, which is the graphical tool we use to manage our databases and run SQL queries. So click on finish. So now we have a command prompt window where we can type instructions to talk to our MySQL server. We don't really need this, so close it. And here's MySQL Workbench. Now the first time you open this page, by default, you should see a connection here. If you don't see it, click on this plus icon. On this page, give this connection a name. Let's say local instance. Now leave all the settings to their default value. But here for the password, click on Store in Vault. And in this box, type the password that you set for the admin user. So I'm going to put that here. Okay. Now click on Test Connection. All right, we successfully connected to the MySQL server on this computer. All right. Then click on OK. Now we click on this connection to connect to our database server. All right. So here's the interface that you'll be using throughout this course. On the left side, we have the navigator panel. In the middle, we have the query editor, which we can resize. This is where we're going to write our SQL queries. And on the right side, we have SQL additions. So we're done with the installation of MySQL on our computer. Next, I'm going to show you how to create the databases for this course. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create the databases for this course. So here I've got MySQL Workbench open. Let me quickly give you an overview of this interface because the first time you open it, it might appear a little bit intimidating, but actually it's not that difficult. So here on the top, we've got this toolbar with these buttons for creating a new tab for writing SQL code, as well as opening a SQL file. And next to that, we've got a bunch of buttons for creating a database, creating new tables, and so on. On the left side, we've got the navigator panel with two tabs, administration and schemas. We use the administration tab to do administrative work, such as starting or stopping our server, importing or exporting data, and so on. The schemas tab shows the databases that we have in the current database server. So currently we only have one database, that is sys, and this is the database that MySQL uses internally to do its work. Now in the middle, we've got this query editor window. This is where we write our SQL code. So we'll be spending most of our time in this course in this window. And on the right side, we've got another panel with two tabs, context help and snippets. The chances are this interface might look slightly different on Windows, but what I'm showing you here is almost identical with what we have on Windows. So don't get hung up if it looks slightly different on your machine. It doesn't really matter. Now up here, we've got these buttons for showing or hiding these panels. So to clean this interface, I'm going to hide this panel on the right side, as well as the panel on the bottom. That is better. Now to create the databases for this course, download the zip file I've attached below this video. When you extract this zip file, you're going to see a bunch of SQL files like this. So the main one that you will be using in this tutorial is called create-databases.sql. So this file contains all the SQL code to create all the databases that we need in this course. Now we also have individual files for creating individual databases. I just added these files in case you need to recreate one of these databases in the future. But for now, don't worry about them. Now, back to MySQL Workbench. Let's open the main SQL file. That is create databases. So this is an example of SQL code. Now this may look complex at the beginning, but trust me, as you go through the course, you're going to understand exactly how everything works here. You're going to be able to write SQL code like this. So we want to execute this to create all the databases for this course. To do that, we click on this icon, this yellow thunder icon that we have on this toolbar here. This will execute either the selection or the entire code if there is nothing selected. For example, if I select this line here and click on this icon, this will execute only this line. In this case, we want to execute the entire code, so we shouldn't select anything. And now let's execute this. Beautiful. So here down the bottom, we have this panel called the output window that shows all the operations performed in our database server. So we can check to see if all the operations completed successfully or something went wrong. As you can see, we've got these green ticks next to each operation. Beautiful. So I'm going to close this panel. That's better. Now on the left side in the schemas tab, currently we don't see the new databases. So we'll have to refresh this view. Beautiful. So we've got all these databases that are prefixed with SQL or SQL. I decided to prefix them with SQL so we know that these are the databases for this course. They don't accidentally clash with another database with the same name on your database server. Now, at the time of recording this video, there are only 4 databases here, but as we go through the course, I'm going to update the script for creating the databases. So when you watch this course, chances are you're going to see more databases here. Don't worry about the difference. Now, as an example, let's explore one of these databases. And by the way, we don't need this tab anymore, so let's close it. That's better. Let's expand the SQL Store database. Now, in every database, we have these objects. We have tables. This is where we store our data. We have views, which are kind of like virtual tables. So we can combine data from multiple tables and put them in a view. And this is especially powerful for creating reports. You're going to learn about them in the future. We also have stored procedures and functions. And these are little programs that we store inside of our database for querying data. For example, we can have a stored procedure for getting all the customers in a given city. So we call that procedure and say, hey, give me all the customers in San Francisco. And this will return all the customers in San Francisco. Okay. Now let's expand the tables. So here are the tables in this database. We have customers, we have orders, products, shippers, and so on. Now select this customers table. Whenever you hover your mouse over this item, you should see these three icons on the right side. Click on the rightmost icon that looks like a table with a thunder. With this, we can see all the data in this table. So this is our customers table. In this table, we have these columns like customer ID, which we use to uniquely identify customers. We also have first name, last name, birth date, phone, address, and so on. So these are the columns in this table, and every row is called a record. So every row represents one customer, and these are the pieces of information we know about each customer. Now let's look at another table. Let's open the orders table. In this table, we have these columns like order ID, customer ID, order date, status, and so on. What is this customer ID here? We use this column to identify who has placed each order. Now, what is interesting here is that we are referring to these customers using their customer ID, which uniquely identifies them. In other words, if John Smith has placed an order, we don't store John Smith here. We only store John's customer ID. Why is that? Here's the reason. It is possible that John Smith might have placed multiple orders in our system. Now, every time John places an order, we need to look up his address and phone to ship his order. Now, it is possible that some of this information might change in the future. John might move to a new place or change his phone number. He might even change his name. If we repeat all that information next to each order, then we'll have to come back and make changes in multiple places. In contrast, with this design, we only store the ID of John here. So anytime we want to change any information about John, instead of changing that here, we go back to our customers table. So let's look at the customer with ID 6. That is actually called Elka. So here are all the information about Elka. This is her phone number, this is her address, and by the way, this is all dummy data that I created using a tool. So if any information about Elka changes in the future, this is the only place that we need to modify. So this is how these databases work. We refer to these databases as relational databases. That basically means in this kind of databases, we have multiple tables that are related to each other using a relationship. So internally, there is a relationship between the customers table and the orders table. So the customer ID column in the customers table is related or linked or associated with the customer ID column in the orders table. Here's the orders table, and here we have the customer ID column. So this was a brief introduction to relational databases. You learned about databases, tables, columns, rows, and relationships. In the next section, I'm going to show you how to retrieve data from a single table in this database. But before going any further, as an exercise, I want you to explore the invoicing database. Look at all the tables, look at all the data to get an idea of the kind of data we have in this database. We're going to use this database a lot in the future. So we'll spend a couple of minutes to explore this database. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to retrieve data from a single table. Now look at the navigator panel. Currently, none of our databases is displayed in bold. That means none of these databases is selected for querying. So the first step to write a query to get data from a database is to select a database. The query that we'll write will be executed against that database. In this demo, we're going to use this SQL store database. So we type out use SQL store. Now, use is a keyword in the SQL language, and that's the reason it's displayed in blue. Now, SQL is not a case-sensitive language, and that means we can use uppercase or lowercase characters. It doesn't really matter, but as a best practice, we should capitalize the SQL keywords and use lowercase characters for anything else. So now let's go ahead and execute this query. All right, look, this SQL store database is now displayed in bold. Now in MySQL Workbench, you can also select a database by double-clicking that. So now I double-clicked SQL invoicing and it's the current database. Now if we run this query again, the SQL Store database becomes selected. All right, now let's write our first query to retrieve all the customers in this database. So after the use statement, we're going to use the select statement. Here's the basic syntax or basic structure of the select statement. We type out select. In front of that, we specify the columns that we want to retrieve. For example, we can retrieve the customer ID column as well as the first name column, or we can retrieve all columns using an asterisk. Now, after that, we use the from clause, and this is where we specify the table that we want to query. In this case, the customers table. So this is the simplest query to select all the customers in a given table. Now, whenever you have multiple SQL statements, you need to terminate each statement using a semicolon. So look, we have a red underline here that indicates an error. If you hover your mouse here, you can see this tooltip saying select is not valid at this position because we didn't terminate the first statement with a semicolon. Okay, now let's execute this query one more time. Once again, we can click on this button here, or we can use a shortcut. So look at the query menu on the top. The first item is execute. Now here's the shortcut for this command. On Mac, it's Shift, Command, and Enter. On Windows, it's going to be different. Honestly, I'm not sure. So whatever it is, use that. So I'm going to press Shift, Command, and Enter. And here are all the customers in this table. So this select statement has two clauses, the select clause and the from clause. But there are other clauses that we can use to filter and sort data. For example, we can use the where clause to filter the result and get the customer with ID 1. So we can write an expression like this, where customer underline ID equals 1. Now when we execute this query, we'll only get the customer with ID 1. So this is the where clause. We can also sort the data. So after where, we use the order by clause. And here we specify the columns that we want to sort the result on. Let's say we want to sort these customers by their first name. So we type out first underline name. That is the name of one of the columns in this table, right? Now, if we execute this query, this order by doesn't really have any impact because we only get one record in the result. So let me temporarily take out the where clause. To do that, we can put two hyphens in front of this line. Now this line is treated as a comment, which means the SQL engine is not going to execute this. Okay, so let's execute this query one more time. Now all the customers that we get are sorted based on their first name. So that's the basic idea. Now over the next few tutorials, you're going to learn more about each of these clauses in detail. But what you need to take away in this tutorial is that these three clauses, from, where, and order by, are optional. As you can see, in this example, I'm not using the where clause. We can also comment out the order by clause. We can also comment out the from clause. So instead of selecting all the columns in a given table, we can select some values like 1 and 2. Now, if we execute this query one more time, in the result, we get something like this. Two columns called 1 and 2. And in these columns, we have these values. So all these clauses are optional, but in the real world, we quite often use all of them. Now, what you need to understand here is that the order of these clauses matters. So we always have select first, then we have from, then where, and finally order by. We cannot change the order of these clauses. Otherwise, we get a syntax error, which basically means the syntax or the grammar or the structure of our SQL statement is incorrect. So it can't be executed. And one last thing before we finish this tutorial. In this example, you can see I've listed all these clauses on a new line. Now, technically, you don't have to do this because line breaks, white spaces, and tabs are ignored when executing SQL statements. So we could come back here and put from in front of select. So select star from customers all in one line. And that's perfectly fine for simple queries. But as your queries get more complex, it's better to put each clause on a new line. So that's all for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we'll explore the select clause in detail. In this tutorial, we're going to look at the select clause in detail. So since our current database is SQL Store, to clean things up, I'm going to remove the first statement. We don't really need it now. Also, I'm going to delete these two comments. We just want to focus on the select clause. All right. So what can we do with this select clause? Well, in the last tutorial, you learned that if we use an asterisk, this will return all the columns. Alternatively, we can specify the columns that we want. And this is helpful in situations where you have a big table with so many columns and perhaps millions of records. If you want to bring back all that data, that's going to put a lot of pressure on the database server, in this case MySQL, as well as the network. So that's when we explicitly specify the columns that we want to get. Let's say we want to get the first name and last name columns. Execute the query. As you can see, we only get these two columns, and they're in the same order we specified here. So if we change the order and put the last name first and execute the query again, now you can see the last name column comes first. Now let's add a new column to the end. Let's get the points for each customer as well. Run the query. So these are the points for each customer, which are calculated based on their shopping. Now, let's say we want to get these points and put them in a mathematical formula to calculate the discount that we can give to each customer. So here we can use an arithmetic expression. Let's say points plus 10. This is an arithmetic expression. So now if we execute this query, for the first record, you can see that their points will end up being 2283. Let's run the query one more time. There you go. Now we can put the original points column here for clarity. So points, comma, points plus 10. Let's run the query one more time. Now you can see the original points, and next to that, you can see the value that we're going to use to calculate the discount. Now here we're using the plus operator, which is for addition. We also have multiplication, division, subtraction, and modulo, which is the remainder of the division. So let's change this to something more complex. Let's say we want to get the points multiplied by 10 and then add 100 to it. Now you can immediately see that this line 1 is getting too long and it doesn't fit on the screen. In situations like this, you can break up the select clause by placing each column on a new line. So select last name, then first name, points, and finally points times 10 plus 100. So let's execute this query one more time. So this is our new column with the new calculated value. Now, one thing you need to understand in this arithmetic expression is the order of operators. And this is based on the order of operators in math. So in math, the multiplication and division operators have higher order or higher precedence than addition and subtraction. So in this expression, first points is multiplied by 10, and then the result is added to 100. Now, if this is not what you want, you can always change the order by using parentheses. As an example, let's change this multiplication to addition and then put that multiplication here. In this expression, first 10 is multiplied by 100 and then the result is added to the points. Now, let's say this is not what we want. So we can change the order by using parentheses here. With this parentheses, first we get the points, add 10 to them, and then multiply the result by 100. So these parentheses are useful for changing the order of operations as well as adding clarity to our code. So someone else reading this code can easily understand the order of these operations. Now let's execute this query one more time. All right, now look at the name of this column here. It's set to the expression that we have on line 5. That doesn't quite make sense. We want to have a clear descriptive name. So we can give this column an alias using the as keyword. So as, and then we give it a name like discount underline factor. Let's run the query again. Now the name of this column is changed. So this is the benefit of using an alias. We can give descriptive names to the columns and the result set. Now, if you want to have a space in the column name, you need to surround it with quotes, either single or double quotes. So we put quotes here and then we can add a space in between these two words. Let's execute the query one more time. Now we've got discount factor. So let's quickly recap everything you learned about the select clause. We can use an asterisk to return all the columns, or we can explicitly specify the columns that we want to return. We can also use arithmetic expressions here, and optionally we can give an alias to each column in the result set. Now there is one more thing you need to know about the select clause. So let's delete this query and select the state column from the customers table. Take a look. These are the states in which our customers are located. Now, currently in this sample data, we don't have any duplicates. In other words, we don't have multiple customers in any of these states. But for this demo, I want to change the state of the first customer to Virginia, so we end up with duplicates in the result set. So let's open up the Navigator panel. Here's our customers table. Let's look at all the data. And here's our first customer, as you can see, is located in the state of Massachusetts. Now I want to change this to Virginia. So double click VA for Virginia, enter, done. Now on the bottom right corner of the screen, you should see two buttons, apply and revert. Unfortunately, I cannot show you these buttons because the recording window is a bit smaller than MySQL Workbench. But look down the bottom, in the bottom right corner, click on apply. You're going to see a dialog box like this asking you to review the changes. So go ahead and click the apply button one more time. All right, beautiful. Now, let's go back to our first query window and execute this query one more time. As you can see, the first two customers are located in Virginia. What if we want to get the unique list of states in the result set? That's when we use the distinct keyword. So select distinct state. With this query, we'll retrieve the unique list of states from the customers table. So with the distinct keyword, we can remove the duplicates. Let's execute the query one more time. Now you can see Virginia is not duplicated. All right, here's an exercise for you. I want you to write a SQL query to return all the products in our database. In the result set, I want to see three columns: name, unit price, and a new column called new price, which is based on this expression, unit price times 1.1. So let's say we want to increase the price of each product by 10%. With this query, we want to get all the products, their original price, and their new price. So pause the video and spend 1 or 2 minutes on this exercise. When you're done, come back, see my solution. All right, this is pretty easy. So we start with select. Now, what columns do we want to select? Name, unit, underline price. And then here we're going to use an arithmetic expression to calculate the new price. So we type out unit price times 1.1 and then give it an alias. So as new underline price, or we could put this in quotes and put a space between new and price. Now, where do we want to select these columns from? From the products table. So from products. Note that I've used uppercase characters for all the SQL keywords and lowercase characters for everything else. So let's go ahead and execute this query. This is what we get. So these are all the products. You can see their original price as well as the new price, which is 10% more expensive. In this tutorial, we're going to look at the where clause in SQL. So earlier I told you that we use the where clause to filter data. For example, let's say we only want to get the customers with points greater than 3,000. So here in the where clause, we can type out a condition like this: points greater than 3,000. When we execute this query, the query execution engine in MySQL is going to iterate over all the customers in the customers table. For each customer, it's going to evaluate this condition. If this condition is true, it will return that customer in the result set. So let's go ahead and execute this. And here's the result. As you can see, we have only 2 customers with points greater than 3,000. So this is what we call the greater than operator, which is one of the comparison operators in SQL. Let me show you the complete list of comparison operators. So we have greater than or equal to. We have less than or equal to. Here's the equality operator. And for not equality, we can use an exclamation followed by an equal sign or something like this. So both these are not equal operators. Let me show you a few examples of these operators. So I'm going to delete all this and bring back the previous query. Let's say we want to get only the customers in the state of Virginia. So we can change our condition to something like this, where state equals Virginia. Note that I have put Virginia in quotes because this is what we call a string. A string is a sequence of characters. So whenever you're dealing with a sequence of characters or basically textual data, you need to enclose your values with either single or double quotes. But quite often, by convention, we use single quotes. So let's execute this query. And here's the result. You can see we only have these two customers with ID 1 and 2 who are located in Virginia. And it doesn't matter if we use uppercase or lowercase characters. So if we type out VA in lowercase and execute the query, we get the exact same result. Now, what if we want to get all the customers outside of the state of Virginia? We can use the not equal operator. So we can either prefix this with an exclamation or use this other notation. Either way, we get the same result. So these are the customers that are not located in Virginia. Now we can use these comparison operators with date values as well. For example, let's say we want to get only the customers born after January 1st, 1990. So we change our condition to birth date greater than. Once again, we use quotes for representing date values, even though dates are actually not strings. But in the SQL language, we should enclose dates with quotes. So here we type out 1990-01 for January -01 for day. So this is the standard or the default format for representing dates in MySQL. 4 digits for the year, 2 digits for the month, and 2 digits for the day. So let's go ahead and execute this query. I actually made a mistake here. So we don't see the result. Instead, we see the action output or the output window. If you scroll to the bottom, you can see the details of the error. So here I used the wrong name for the column. We should separate these two words with an underscore. That is the name of our column. So let's execute the query one more time. So we only have 3 customers born after January 1st, 1990. So these were examples of comparison operators in SQL. In the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how to combine multiple conditions when filtering data. All right, here's your exercise. I want you to write a query to get the orders that are placed this year. So look at the orders table, see what columns do we have there, and based on that, write a query with a where clause. So here's the orders table. In this table, we have this column, order date. We can use this column to see the orders that are placed this year. So here's our query. Select star from orders where order underline date is greater than or equal to January 1st, 2019, assuming this is the current year. So 2019-01-01. Now, since currently we are in the year 2019, this query will return all the orders placed this year. But next year, this query is not going to give us the right result. But don't worry about it. Later in the course, I will show you how to write a query to get the orders placed in the current year. So for the purpose of this exercise, this is a valid solution. Now let's execute this query and see what we get. So we have only one order, order ID 1, that is placed in the current year. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to combine multiple search conditions when filtering data. So let's say we want to get all the customers that are born after January 1st, 1990, who also happen to have more than 1,000 points. So this is where we use the AND operator. So we type out AND, and after we type out another condition, like points greater than 1,000. Now when we execute this query, we'll only get customers who have both these conditions. Let's take a look. So execute, we only have 2 customers. And if you look, both these people are born after 1990 and they have more than 1,000 points. So this is the AND operator. When we use this operator, both these conditions should be true. In contrast to the AND operator, we have the OR operator. So with OR, if at least one of these conditions is true, that row will be returned in the result set. Let's take a look. Now we execute this query again. Instead of 2 records, we have quite a few records. So for example, we have this person who was not born after 1990, But if you look at their points, they have more than 1,000 points. So any customer records that satisfies at least one of these conditions will be returned. Now let's take this to the next level. Let's say we want to get customers who are either born after 1990 or they should have at least 1,000 points and live in Virginia. So this is how we do this. We type out and then we add another condition, state equals Virginia. Let's execute this query and see what we get. We only get 4 records. So these are the customers that are born either after 1990 or they have more than 1,000 points and live in Virginia. If you look at the first customer here, this person is not born after 1990, but you can see that she lives in Virginia and she has more than 1,000 points. So the last 2 conditions are true for this customer. Now, when combining multiple logical operators, you need to be aware of the order of these operators. So earlier I talked about the order of arithmetic operators. I told you that multiplication have a higher order than addition and subtraction. And we can use parentheses to override the default order. We have the same concept in logical operators. So the AND operator is always evaluated first. So when this query is executed, the query execution engine first evaluates this condition, because here we're using an AND. It doesn't matter that we typed out this condition after the first condition, because the AND operator has a higher precedence. Now you can always change the order using parentheses, and this also makes your code cleaner and easier to understand. So here we can put parentheses around these last 2 conditions. And also we can put these on a new line for clarity, something like this. So anyone who reads this code can easily understand what is the intent of this query. Now we also have another logical operator called not, and we use that to negate a condition. Let me show you. So I'm going to simplify our where clause. Let's say we're searching for customers who were born after 1990 or they have more than 1,000 points. If we execute this query, we get these people, customers with ID 1, 3, 5, and so on. Now we can use the not operator to negate this condition. So we apply not here, and preferably we also put parentheses around this condition. Now when we execute this query, we'll see other customers that are not in the current result set. Let's